with this little video, I think I'm going to show some of the skills that are helpful when you want to design for speed and you don't want to be bogged down by all the other, like what other icons by other creators have done for you. So let me show you something that is clear as we edit these icons. So I have a few icons here that I've already edited, but let me go grab one that is unedited yet. So for example, actually we have a few right here. So I took these out because they all are pretty much the same thing. And so having these, being able to design them all together at once helps you because you actually have a good sense for what you're working with and how you made the shapes to get them to be what you want them to be. So if you notice here, this is the original icon actually. If you triple click it, you will see that it's composed of just nodes. If you actually look into the list, you will notice that there is just a vector up here. There is nothing else. And that's a problem, right? Because if you are designing this icon to match the pixel grid, to match a pattern, to match, for example, I don't know, the middle square or the middle rectangle or the tall icon, it'll be that much harder for you to manipulate, right? Because what you will be doing is essentially you'll be dragging this back and forth between your pixels. And you're like, okay, well, now it looks like 2 pixels, now it doesn't, but look how many mistakes I've made. I've already moved the shape so many times, and this is really distracting, right? Because it may not look right. So let's undo some of these changes and take it back to what it is. Another problem with this is that this is a flattened SVG, and as a flat SVG, this means there are no recognizable shapes that a graphical editing program can work with to manipulate with properties. So for example, even though this right here is a square and this is a line, none of the line properties and none of the square properties that help you manipulate that square in a graphical program will actually be at play here. So you will be handicapped by the ability to edit this icon. And so it's, in my view, that it's a much faster process if you just redraw the items in Figma or Penpot or whatever application you're using, or Inkscape, right? Because there are a couple of things that you will gain from this. One is you will have a real source file. A real source file. This means that you have all of the shapes that are manipulatable at your disposal. And if one day there is some kind of big redesign, like actually what we're doing right now, you have the ability to go to every one of those squares and very quickly shape them to what you want them to be without having the fear of having to draw with the nodes which are not correlated and don't belong in any way. What you should know is that at the end of the process, this icon, even though inside the graphical editing program, it is composed of shapes with their own properties, when you export this file, the file will be flat. No groups, no unions, no exclusions will be carried over. And that's a good thing because the file is almost ready for production and you don't have to do anything but just edit on your graphic editing program. So for example, in this case, I'm editing a shape that mimics these 2 squares with a couple of arrows, and I'm noticing that there are some things that are sort of off and they're sort of misaligned in the source file, and I want them to look a little more conventional, a little more organized, and more aligned to the pixel grid. So it seems to me that this icon, this original icon, really lends itself to taking over the tall icon, the tall icon shape. So what is the tall icon shape or the tall icon grid? It's this right here. I don't know if you can follow, but it's this one. It's this shape. And as you can see, it has 4 pixels to the left and right, and 2 pixels at the top and the bottom. Okay. Now, if it was some other kind of shape, I could say, well, this aligns more to this right here, which is the square. Actually, right there, the square. And I will try to make sure that the icon is contained within this shape so that it's properly aligned and it has a good balance when users are working with it. Now, is this foolproof? Is this like, the ultimate thing that you can ever do for icons? No, you can actually deviate from these shapes depending on how busy or crowded or legible your icons are. You can change all of this to, you can break the mold, so to say. But I think it's safe, especially for action icons, to stay within a certain shape because they will be used in many different situations where users really need to make sure that they're recognizable. Now, even though you're doing this work manually, it's important that you seek feedback from others as you complete more work, so that you can see what assumptions others make when they see your work. Now, here's another angle of this. None of this is purely it's strictly scientific work. This is an artist working with clay rather than a surgeon or like a robot doing an operation, right? It's not the same thing. One follows a set of instructions and the other one follows like more esoterical ideas about design and organization, things that look good rather than things that are demonstrably appreciated by many people, right? So I think at some point we will have to take a look at how this works. But for now, I think it's a means of expression, and you gotta work within that realm for now. Time for feedback will come soon. Now, another important thing that you want to keep in mind is how do you quickly make shapes to look like, for example, an outlined square, an outlined oval or triangle. And it's on Figma, at least, it's pretty simple. For example, I have this square right here, and I wanted to quickly have a square inside and form like a 2-pixel borderline. I could do a couple of things. I could duplicate this, and I'm just gonna give it a different color so that it's distinguishable. I could do this and shrink it to what I want, and then do a difference or a subtract, and boom, I have my stuff. But another easier way I think that Figma has that I really like is if you do Shift X, and look, immediately it turned this from a shape to an outline border. And now if I go to the tool section and I set a number 2, I get my shape. And it's all correlated. It is still in the middle. And look, with the radius, you can just do this and make it a 1-pixel radius. Or you can come up to the area here, to the tools, and just put our number 1 for a radius. And there's your shape. And now you can manipulate however you want, and it will retain its 2-pixel borderline, like this. Now you can do the same thing with an oval. So for example, let's say I would love to put an oval or a circle all over this graphic here, but I only want the outline. I'm going to do Shift and X, and now I have my outline. I will give it a number 2, and there is my shape. And now I can just manipulate however I want, and the borderline will be retained. In fact, with an oval, you can actually cut it, you can give it an arc, and very quickly make a pie chart, for example. And you don't have to do anything more than just, touch some of these angles here and get it done. It's very simple. Now, another little trick that I'm doing for example, for these types of lines right here, is I use my pen tool. So I'm gonna press the letter P, and I'm going to draw, and you see how it snaps to the pixel? That is fantastic on Figma and Penpot because it makes it that much easier. You don't have to be so precise with your mouse clicking to make something happen. And look, I'm gonna make a 2 pixel line. I'm gonna click up here. I'm gonna go all the way down and click down here. And I'm gonna hit enter so as to exit the editing mode. So now the line is by itself. And if you notice, it's a 1 pixel line, but that's not what I want. I want it to be 2 pixels, at least for this case. So I'm going to go to the tools area, press the number 2, and hit enter. Now, sometimes it's a little bit pesky to try to round the edges of a line or a path. So in this case, Figma particularly has a little bit of a helper here. When you go to the tools section in the stroke area, since what we're working with is a stroke, you can actually select an arrow, a triangle, a reverse triangle, a circle, and look, you can also do a round end. The same can be done for the other one. Now, I have found that making the ends an arrow or a triangle, they are harder to manipulate. So I generally try to just draw those things. But if it helps you, you can actually just start manipulating this, and there you go. You have your shape. Now, with a triangle, sorry, it's a little bit, kind of the same thing. You can actually draw a triangle using the pen tool, press the P key, then draw your triangle, and you see it immediately wants to go into outline mode. But I don't want it to be an outline. I want it to be a shape inside. So we can do the reverse here and do Shift X, and now it becomes a shape rather than an outline. And you can manipulate it however you want. You can move this node, or you can move any other nodes. You can move 2 of them at the same time. Either way. Or you can, do it however you want. Now, one thing I mentioned in a previous video is that it's always a good idea to make your nudge amount smaller. What is a nudge amount? The nudge amount is the amount of space that your nodes or shapes will move when you press the arrow keys. So for example, in my case, I have this node selected and I press my right arrow and it moves half a pixel. I press it again and it moves another half. Why is this helpful? Because we're working at a very reduced shape. So 24 pixels by 24, it's not a lot to work with, but you have to be precise enough not to lose your place. And a good trick to get this done is by using your arrow keys. That way your movements are precise and they're not dependent on your ability or your motor ability with your hands over the mouse. So how do you change this? If I believe it's it's power key. There we go. It's your meta key plus the slash shows up opens up this menu, and then you can just put nudge amount. We're gonna click it, and you see I have it. The small nudge is 0.5. I set that up. It could be 2, it could be 3, it could be 4, it could be 5, whatever. It could be 1, it could be 20, but that is the number of pixels. So I'm just gonna do 0.5 because that is what I really need it for right now. You can change this at any time. If 1 pixel helps you better, then that's great. The large nudge is the big nudge. is usually the one that when you do the shift and arrow, so the one that moves a ton of pixels at once. Since we're working with a grid that is divided by 8, I set it to 8. That way, because most of the times Figma particularly, it's set to 10 pixels for the big nudge, and that's not a multiple of 8, and it's harder to work with when you're in an 8x8 kind of framework on your icon. So these are just a couple of tricks that you can do to like make the shapes again. When you are done, let's say you have lined up all of your items, they look good. If you shrink it, it seems to keep its shape. You're satisfied with the work. Then you can do a couple of things. You can click Union up here, and this whole shape will stay the same together. It's a bit of a different kind of group in that they will share properties such as color throughout the whole shape. So it's always a good idea to keep it as a union. But you will notice that in Figma particularly, unions are non-destructive. So they are essentially groups, but they're treated as one shape. So for example, if I went up here, this is how you see the difference. If I took this whole union of items and I went to the tools area and I set my corner radius to 2, you see every shape turns to 2. But look, I can move them independently and they retain their properties. That's one of the advantages of putting them all in a union. I'm not gonna do that. But you could also select some of them, for example, and just do 1. And now they have their rounded corners if you want to have a variety of shapes and looks. Now, there are instances when a union is not recommended because, like I said, they will share properties. And when these shapes share the properties, for example, the shape of color, that's not always a good thing, because you may have multicolor icons, such as this one. Look what happens if I put a union on it. Not great, right? Because the color is now shared with everybody. So I don't want to do that. So instead, for shapes like these, I'm going to just simply do a group. Control G or Command G for a Mac. That's how you create a group. But for example, here's another example of this. It doesn't do me any good to keep these shapes, these two shapes of different colors, as a union, because this is what will happen. It turns black because they share more than just being together. It's a lot of their color and position properties, and that's not great. So in these cases, I set them as a group. And as you organize your groups, it's a lot easier for another designer to come into the space and understand the kind of work you did. And it's a lot easier for designers to reshape some of these elements on the screen and make sure that they work as you expect them to work. And it's not so difficult. So I hope this video helped you out. If you're starting to help with this project, let me know. I'm usually on Matrix, and so just let's work together if you want to help. I think in most cases, following the good work that our previous designers did with Breeze is a heck of a lot easier than just inventing our own shapes. So to them, we say thank you, and we're happy to elevate some of this work through moving from a 22 to a 24 pixel grid. Thank you.